people to be waiting.
You are. I don't know that I am.
We are. We all are. So we got a little wind up here. We're live, but not live all the way live, so that Cecil can have a little bit of snip here. And let's go live. The silence is broken. Let's go live. Who will be the biggest week one surprise? That and more this week on the couch. Dwain McFarland. Who are the headlines going to be about in the fantasy football world? Who's the biggest surprise of week one?
Man, Sig, like I could go so many ways with this. But do you want me to just give you who I think is the biggest?
Who's the first name that popped into your head?
The first name that comes into my head is Corey Davis. Corey Davis in a role that's going to be a funnel offense. The funny thing is I'm excited about two Jets. How long has it been, Sig, since we've been excited about two Jets? Like legit excited. He and Elijah Moore, I am super excited about both. But Corey Davis is a guy that, he's just been written off a little bit, Sig. He's one of the only top 6 NFL draft picks at wide receiver to not finish in the top 36 in his rookie season since 2011. But that's some pretty strong company with AJ Green, Julio Jones. He also only played 11 games that year. But if you look at what he's done since then, when he's on the field, his targets per route have held steadily well up over 20%. He had a 25% target share season by the age of 24. So he's done some really interesting things, but he also was a little bit unlucky, or maybe, lucky because he got, to play with AJ Brown, but he was in a very run heavy offense that suddenly drafted another really good receiver. And so when I look at this offense, it's going to be modeled after Kyle Shanahan's offense. We don't have a tight end. That's the key here, Sig. We're going to see plenty of 21 personnel. You're going to see 12. They should use more 11, to be honest. I would go with McVay's style of offense if I were running this offense, if I were Mike LaFleur, but I'm not. They pay him those dollars, not me. And I think this could be more like a Ram style attack. You get Jamison Crowder in the slot. You can work Keelan Cole in and out of the offense as well. I think that's your way to get your best weapons on the field. But we've seen, even early in the preseason, that they're going to use plenty of 21, plenty of 12. If you look at their games, with the starters, and this can be tricky because game scripts are all perfect still, right? When the starters are in preseason, so you naturally see more of the base personnel. But you saw under 40% of the time were they in 11. So that still, though, is a data point you have to pay attention to because it shows you what they want to be, Sig. What do they want to be? And how do they want to protect Zach Wilson? And I think Corey Davis becomes a huge part of it. The talent is there, still a top 6 pick. The underlying data points below his yardage and all those things are all still there. I think we could see a 27, 28% target share type season for Corey Davis. I think you could see 150 targets for Corey Davis in this offense. Which would smash if you've been taking him in fantasy drafts. One of my most owned players. So I think I own him on almost 40% of my team, Sig, and I'm up to 24 teams. So not including best ball. That's just like redraft. So I'm big time in on Corey Davis, taking him in the 7th round every time he's there.
And I think that what's exciting about Corey Davis is you have a rookie quarterback. You want to know who he feels comfortable throwing to because he's going to throw the ball a lot this year. And all preseason, it was Corey Davis. I was a little bit cool on Corey Davis for exactly the reasons you described. He was if someone's going to beat us, it'll be Corey Davis when you faced the Tennessee offense, which has implications for Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, maybe even Anthony Ferguson, because if we're even positing that some of Corey Davis's production was a byproduct of the role he was playing, assuming the play calling still good with Downing as it was with Arthur Smith, this gets Atlanta entangled here, then Julio Jones should be set up for maybe a career year, or maybe not a career year, because there were some years that he got so many targets. But the point is a highly efficient year. But also, if Corey Davis's talent is durable and he can go to a number 1 role, and hey, good news, Stephon Gilmore is hurt and may even get traded. So take those off his schedule because he is going to have to face Xavier Howard a couple of times. He is going to have faced Tre'Davious White a few times. That's what comes with being a number 1. But this week, he'll get J.C. Horn, Dante Jackson. So that's a good one to look at. Interesting, too, to have Sam Darnold against his own team in week 1. And Elijah Moore, who we love. Jamison Crowder's on the COVID list and is a little banged up. So absolutely, this could be a big Elijah Moore coming out party. And we'll see about the running game. They have a good run blocking line, actually. Can they stay close with Carolina? Because you have to think the other side of this is if they can stay competitive, they probably won't throw the ball that much. They don't want to throw the ball that much, not with the rookie quarterback, and they want him to be throwing off of play action. They don't want the the defense teeing off on him. But I like the idea of the Jets offense in general, just the Jets in general, Dwain. Like, what does the post-Adam Gase bounce look team-wide? So this is exciting. There's so many big reveal, exciting moments in week one. Give me somebody else. So you just answered my direct question of the first name that popped in, but I know there were a lot of names. Drop a couple of more names that you want to make sure to give some love when we think about week one surprises.
Sure. I mean, we can move away from the Jets, but Elijah Moore would be the other. I think the only reason that Elijah Moore didn't crawl all the way up to the 7th, 8th round ADP as well, like in a 12-team league, is strictly because he hurt his quad. I mean, the drum, as you like to say, Sig, the drum beat, and I use that word a lot, but it was there for Elijah Moore, through minicamp, through OTA, through early part of training camp. Then he got injured. So the guy's not just going to magically lose, the talent and everything they loved about him. I see him playing more in that Deebo Samuel role. They'll get him the ball close to the line of scrimmage, but they can kick him into the slot. They can let him stretch the seam vertically. And I think the thing with the Jets will be with the problems they're going to have on defense now, because unfortunately they've had some bad injuries, that are going to hurt the defense. It's going to be interesting to see how often can they truly stay in that conservative type of offense. There's going to be plenty of games where they're going to be forced to pass the ball a lot. So I won't belabor the point, with Elijah Moore. But this is a year, Sig, where I'm excited about a lot of the rookie receivers. I was excited about the rookie receivers last year, and look what they did, for a lot of teams, whenever it comes down to winning fantasy championships. And a lot of them you could get on the wire. Not so much this year because of what happened. And people are like, oh, I got to have the next Claypool. I got to have the next T. Higgins. I've got to own the next Justin Jefferson, next CD Lamb. So most of them have been rostered in most fantasy leagues, but I'm super excited still about Terrace Marshall. I think even though we've got 3 wide receivers, and I definitely think that DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are the 2 lead candidates there. When I look at him, what I see is basically an arbitrage play on Claypool. Ben Roethlisberger played okay last season, not great, but the Steelers threw the ball a ton. I expect the Panthers to throw the ball not more than anyone, but I think they'll be in the top 7 or 8 in pass attempts this season, and the way that they're going to run their offense. So even though Terrace Marshall's not going to be out there when they're in 12 or 21 personnel, which is, 2 tight ends, or whenever you've got a fullback on the field, basically when you don't have 3 wide receivers, Terrace Marshall's not going to be out there. But when they are in their 11 personnel group, he's going to be out there, and I just see an opportunity for him to do something similar to what we saw with Claypool last year, because he's going to be they're going to use him very differently than what they did Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, they really asked to fill in once CMC was hurt, they asked Curtis Samuel to basically take all of that underneath stuff. And then they started using DJ Moore more down the field. But what we've already seen this preseason is Terrace Marshall is going to be used to stretch the field. And so there's going to be plenty of big plays, plenty of big opportunities for him. I expect him to probably lead the team in touchdowns. I mean, I'm not going to say like I would bet like my house or anything on it, but I think there's a good chance that this is a player that leads the team in touchdowns. And you can get, you could have drafted him in the 13th round of your fantasy draft where Chase Claypool costs a 6th. And so you're getting literally half off for a player that's probably going to run the same amount of routes as Claypool and could give you potential production similar to what you got as Claypool, which makes him, especially in deeper leagues, Sig, if you're playing 3 receivers and a flex, he becomes a value flex commodity. And so that's just a guy that I think if he does happen to be on your waiver wire, if you're in a smaller league, figure out how to get him now before week 1 happens. Don't wait.
I muted myself. Sorry for this awkward silence, everybody. Hey, a little rusty here. It's been a little while. I'll give you another one, Dwain, in the same vein, which I liked because it rhymed. Josh Palmer. And I think that when we're talking about Josh Palmer, when we're talking about Terrace Marshall, when we're talking about Elijah Moore, we're talking about rookie wide receivers, and you bring up Chase Claypool, the idea here is whatever teams have planned for the rookie receivers, the rookies can change that. The rookies can just come out and be so compelling that they have to give them more targets. They have to give them more snaps. They have to call more plays for that player. That's what happened with Chase Claypool last year. I think Terrace Marshall is a great name, and we're looking for that lead in. I don't remember Chase Claypool making as much preseason, offseason hype as Elijah Moore. Terrace Marshall also has been steady every practice. Somebody's saying he made one of the plays of practice. And Josh Palmer also good enough that they moved on from Tyron Johnson, who I think is now with Jacksonville. They have Jalen Guyton as the deep guy. But remember, Mike Williams, not the most durable. Keenan Allen missed 2 games, parts of 2 other games. We like Justin Herbert. We like this passing game. We like this offensive line. And we like what Josh Palmer did last year against corners like J.C. Horn, like Patrick Surtain. He faced the corners that were highly regarded and played well against them. So you would argue that he's much more ready. This idea, I brought this up in the offseason, Dwayne. Some snaps on a college player's film are more important than others when we're forecasting their NFL success. And certainly show me what he did against guys that are going in the top 10 NFL draft, and I feel a little more comfortable forecasting that he'll be ready. Josh Palmer will be ready. So, yeah,
I love this
go
one,
ahead.
Sig. I really love this one because this is one that even in some of the deepest formats, like even if you're playing in like mid and high stake leagues, if you're listening to this, like that's a player that's available quite a bit. And what's interesting about it is I put out an article on Monday, and I mostly like being positive, like, hey, here are all the players you should go after. But eventually, you got to do an article that here are the players, that I'm fading. And Mike Williams was one of them, Sig. If you look at him, I know they've talked about him being in that X role. I just don't see it. That's where Keenan Allen doesn't play the X, but he operates where the X role from the Joe Lombardi offense operates, which is in that short to intermediate range between the hash marks, mismatches against zone coverages, against linebackers and safeties. And so I just don't see Mike Williams really working his way into that role. I think they're going to still try to use him as a deep threat. And my big thing with Mike Williams is, despite being an early first-round draft pick number 7 overall, he has never been able to get past 17% targets per route. And so targets per route, if you guys don't know, it's a great equalizer because coaches, just like what Sig said, can do different things and have different players on the field at different times. Yards per route run are really nice, but targets tell you really, like, is the player good enough that the quarterback wants to throw him the ball in the most simplistic way that I can think about it. And so here are the comps that come with Mike Williams, as being a pick, and I just cut it off at top 40, right? I said, hey, top 40 picks in the draft, looking back to 2011, looking at targets per route, never could quite get over that 17% target share mark. They might have been right around it, just so I could have a list better than like 3 people. But Brashad Perriman, Dorial Green-Beckham, Laquan Treadwell, Marquise Lee, Michael Floyd, Nelson Aguilar. Here's the good one, Will Fuller. But Will Fuller did break out in year 3 and got well past that. And so we're already on year 4 for Mike Williams. The other one that was almost in there was Brandon Cooks, but he was up at the 18 and 19%. So he was close, but he had gotten past it. So I'm just concerned. Like Mike Williams, I think just kind of is what he is. And if Josh Williams has anything else, Josh Palmer has anything else to him, it's like what you said. I think we could see his role expand even without a Mike Williams injury. I think that could be in the cards, especially given what you already talked about, the data point we get with them, moving on and narrowing this passing tree down to fewer targets.
Yeah, with the Mike Williams, it's interesting too. He's in his 5th year. They're paying him $15 million. They're paying him franchise tag money. The 5th-year option on a top 10 pick is basically franchise tag money. So they've got plans for him because it was a non-guaranteed 5th-year option. They could have moved on from him, but I think they drafted Josh Palmer knowing they probably are going to move on from him this year. And something to watch because we're excited
Something
about the Chargers.
hard though, Sig. You spend an early pick on somebody, you want it to work out.
Well,
and that's in 1 year versus having to re-up for multiple, in my mind, is much less of a commitment. But I think it is a good point, that you're bringing up, and it's part of the equation for sure.
And by the way, on the rookie wide receiver tip real quick, Zare, what's up, man? It said Diami Brown, also an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Carter Samuel's injury.
Very interesting.
He's a high wire.
Samuel's out week 1. Wow.
Right.
Another Sigmund, the genie could be out of the bottle.
Yeah. Well, and these are also what we're talking about here, Dwayne, is week 2 waiver wire pickups. Yes. And for those leagues that have pre-week 1 waiver wire runs, some of my leagues have them, and you have an extra spot because you drafted T.Y. Hilton or whatever, so you've got a spot to play around with. You drafted Latavius Murray, by the way, just released right before we went on the air. Then these are names to think about. Another thing you need to think about, by the way, if you're listening to this, I hope you're a Football Guys subscriber. If not, go to join.footballguys.com/couch. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. What I want to talk about right now is the $35,000 subscriber contest. It is fun. It will keep you up at night thinking about all of the combinations and permutations. The Football Guys staff also enters it. You can see how you measure up against us. First prize gets $20,000. And your entry is included in your Football Guys subscription. So make sure you go to footballguys.com/contests and get in that $35,000 subscriber contest. This is a public service announcement. This is not an ad. This is not a live read. This is a public service announcement for footballguys.com subscribers. We can turn the page. Actually, I want to go backwards a little bit.
We can go forever on these. Wherever you want to go.
Wherever we want to go. That's the beauty of the couch. Well, that's the beauty of being stimulated and excited about this stuff. And there's no more exciting time in terms of anticipation than right before week 1. I've always described it, Dwain, as like the click, click, click on the roller coaster for the first hill. You just got on, you got your little safety harness on, and you're on the click, click, click. Because once we get over that first hill, we're never going to slow down again. Not until the end of the season. So it's fun. But we've been trying to get together a couch episode for a little while, and it just nature schedules and busyness and things like that. I know there are a few people who still haven't drafted. I know if you're in a high stakes draft, you can still draft so through the weekend. Just give me a couple. You mentioned Corey Davis as one of your highest rostered players. Give me another Dwain McFarland special so people listening can nod along and say, oh yeah, I've got that guy. I'm in with Dwain.
Yeah, so I do a lot of Football Guys Players Championship. So another shout out for Football Guys over at FFPC. And so it's tight end premium, but still I think this holds true no matter what. So Cole Kmet is a tight end that I've just targeted very heavily. And so if you look at his story down the stretch last season, he really took over as the primary tight end, and Jimmy Graham started only playing whenever they were in 12 personnel. Now, Jimmy Graham did come in some and get some of the looks inside the 5. This preseason, Cole Kmet only got to play like 2 drives with the starters. Then he had a hamstring injury, and so he's kind of been out. We didn't get to see him anymore in the preseason. But while he was in, we really saw the same thing again. He was out there for 100% of Andy Dalton's dropbacks with the starters. So every time the Bears dropped back to pass, Cole Kmet was in a route. And last season, I already talked about targets per route earlier. So listen to how Cole Kmet really started to explode. I think there's a case that Cole Kmet could be the number 2 option on the Bears rather than who we're all looking at, which is Darnell Mooney. And if you look at him from a targets per route perspective down the stretch, he was the player that they wanted to look to more. And so as he started to take the rollover in week 10, he got up to an 11% targets per route. Week 12 was really his second week as the starter, 8%. But here are his targets per route run over the last 5 games of the season: 35%, 25%, 10%, 21%, 23%. I'm going to name to you the tight ends that get over 20%. I won't name them all. But there's really not that many. It's kind of funny. There's not a ton of them. But when you look at rookie seasons and go back to guys that were able to accomplish those sort of things, there's some really cool names on there. And I'm not saying he's Travis Kelce. I'm not saying that he's Zach Ertz. But those are the types of names that we're talking about where in their rookie seasons they started to really come on, or they exhibited some of these same traits. And he's a guy that you can basically get for free, Sig. So in an FFPC draft, he's round 13 because tight end premium. But in your normal league or say you're playing in like the NFFC or one of these other big tournaments where you only need 1 tight end and you can't flex one, like you can get Cole Kmet in round like 16. And so I love him as my backup tight end. I don't want to go into my season with him as my number 1, but I love having Cole Kmet on my rosters. I've got him right now over 45% rosters. So yeah, now I love doing that on players I can get late. So I've got 24 teams right now in the Football Guys Players Championship, for example. Early round players, I like to mix things. I have certain guys that I'm fading. We can talk about those if you want. So I don't own any of them, but I have mostly everybody else is kind of spread around. And a lot of us do because there's just a lot of good players, and you don't want too much stock in one thing, because if you get an injury, it can crater your team when it's on a first or a second round pick, especially in some of these highly competitive leagues where there's 20 people on your roster. There's not a lot on the waiver wire. Like when the draft's done, it can be pretty tight. There's always going to be things that come up, but it's not like a typical league where, there's always someone sitting on the wire that you're debating. Do I pick them up and drop this person? Like sometimes I'll go to these leagues and every league's a little different, but there will literally be no one to even look at for the week. I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'm just moving on with what I have. I have a player that's hurt and out for the season. Like I'm just dying to find one person that I could just drop them for, and it's hard to even come up with a name. So Cole Kmet is a really big one for me at tight end.
Chicago's fun too, because they're going to have better quarterback play this year than they've had at any point in the Matt Nagy era. So this is one of those situations where if you like Matt Nagy or you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, they'll say, well, maybe we'll really see what he can do as a play caller, as a play designer. Because remember, early on in Mitchell Trubisky's career with Nagy, there were some games where they just boat race teams. I think there was a game against Tampa Bay when every play worked. I don't remember the exact score of the game.
That's back when they would always zoom in on his play calling sheet and it says UBU on it. I just know that about Matt Nagy's play sheet. It's the UBU play sheet. Yeah.
We all need our self-affirmation,
Hey, I agree. I've got a coffee mug that says that.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I should be doing that more. I should have more self-affirmations. But what's exciting now, granted, there's a lot of factors here. There's going to be a lot of signal noise problems. There's going to be signal noise problems more than typical years because we have this new 3-game preseason. A lot of teams didn't really play the starters. Even teams that have new offenses and defenses didn't really do a lot to give the first teamers live reps. You also have just the idea of temporary factors. In the Bears case, Tevin Jenkins is out. There's a issue. Their interior offensive line is right on, but otherwise, I don't know. Week 1 against the Rams.
Yeah, it was a tough year, for utilization, because the way teams are now approaching the preseason, they're used. Do you remember the days, Sig, where it was pretty easy? It started changing even before COVID happened last year. But used to, you knew the third or fourth game would be the dress rehearsal, and then they would rest everyone, right? The final game. So typically the third game of the preseason was the NFL dress rehearsal for pretty much every team. Then week 4 was, let's see who's going to make our final cuts, let everybody else play, but starters didn't play. They might play a drive, come out just to kind of make sure you're not rusty, get a drive in. Maybe, the first preseason game, they may not have played still. Second preseason game, they probably played a quarter, right? But then that third game, you knew you were going to get a half of the starting offense against the starting defense. And now every game is its own. Like you could have a starting offense out there for half a game against a team that didn't play any starters the whole game. You could have a team like the Eagles that's mixing some starters with some non-starters. That's the most confusing. You have several teams. And so when I would do, the utilization report for Pro Football Focus, like there were some, I had to kind of have like a confidence interval almost of like, how much do we trust this data? It's still interesting. It's still a data point, but it's not, a lot of it wasn't necessarily good enough to hang your hat on. Which brings me to a player. Can I ask you a question? Technically, yeah, sure. I'm on the couch here, but what are you doing, Sig, with Marquez Callaway? A player that, when I watch him, and I even thought this last year when I was watching him, but I'm just like, this player has something. Good. I know he doesn't have the pedigree. So you go, and you're in, I know right now you're not, but you're a New Orleans guy. So tell us on Marquez Callaway.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I think most people did not notice that when he was forced into action because of injury problems, he was good. The game wasn't too big for him. He played fast. He played with toughness. And this is a guy who can work every level of the field. He's a good route runner. He was an undrafted player. But, Dwain, I think we're seeing every year the talent gap between undrafted players and first and second day picks is not that big, especially if they're utilized correctly, especially if they're used in a way that is to their strengths. Callaway was used on a lot more of the short, intermediate stuff, and he was fantastic. And then he hurt his ankle. And that was about the most we heard from him. Now, everything from this summer is he's carrying himself like a number one. He's playing like a number one. It doesn't matter whether it's Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. It was mentioned in the chat room, he may see a lot of Jair Alexander. And that whole situation, as a New Orleanian, I can say that I don't know how the team's going to be as far as energy level, intensity. The game's going to be in Jacksonville. I suppose this is a game to get behind Green Bay in general because they've got the whole last dance narrative, and New Orleans is a team that I certainly, even without Drew Brees, they all can see themselves as a yardstick against New Orleans, see where they're at. So I don't know if it's going to be a great week one. You mentioned, by the way,
I don't think he's going to get much Jair, just so folks know, like the Packers stopped moving, Jair around last year, only when they thought they had a true elite number one, which I don't think they're going to think first week coming in, against Callaway. So I think they're going to be able to get Callaway where they want him. The thing that stood out to me, Sig, when it was time for Winston to go win this job, it was very clear who he was going to. and the plays I thought that Callaway made, I know a lot of people, they discount it. It's like, well, that's just a preseason. I'm like, man, I went back and watched each of those plays like 4 or 5 times. I mean, those are great catches, Sig. I mean, getting bumped at the end of the route, double coverage, tracking the ball all the way to the ground with 2 guys draped on you on the first one down the middle of the field. The next one's aiming at the front pylon, but really more to the back shoulder, and he has to make an adjustment for it. And it's one-on-one coverage, and he toasts the best corner on the Jaguar. I just, I don't know. Like when I watch him, it's just, I try not to get overly excited because it's another player that I own, quite a bit of. I'm not as high as I am on some of these other players that we talked about, but a lot of it's because everybody else has got so excited about him. Like he just keeps moving up the draft board.
Yeah, as he should. It's that momentum. It's all that momentum. Not every one of the players with momentum going into the season are going to make good on it, but trust that when we have the short list of players who are the week one surprises, the signs will be there for a lot of them. They won't truly be a surprise if you've been paying attention, but that's why we have Dwain here. That's why we're here on the couch today. I guess since you opened up the topic, give me a fade. I like to call it the 10-foot pole team. Who's on the all 10-foot pole team for Dwain?
Yeah, so we already talked about Mike Williams. He's definitely on the 10-foot pole team. Another player is Myles Gaskin, and it's not because I don't. Again, this is all about ADP. I like Myles Gaskin, but there's enough uncertainty for me, and I think he's a far better player than Malcolm Brown. I think he's, I actually like Salvin Ahmed, but I know that Gaskin is the guy that they trusted in more situations already last year when they had Ahmed on the roster. But it's a guy that, for where he's going in drafts, round 4 and 5 sometimes, Sig, I just, especially in PPR formats, I'm like, give me DJ Moore, give me Chris Godwin, give me, even, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, these guys, just, I feel better. And I'm not saying none of those players will bust, but I feel better about knowing they have their role, and Gaskin has got to deal with, there could be some irrational coaching going on. They've told us they're going to use 3 backs. And so far they have, Sig. And I think the thing that took me the longest to understand, with fantasy football, because we want to always believe in the best for the players that we think are the best. And it's also part of the fun part. So I would also say, don't ever lose that, because it makes fantasy football fun. And you don't want to be overly cynical about everything, which, sometimes I find myself being about fantasy football, especially when it comes to, I spend a lot of time analyzing coaches and it makes me cynical. But, whenever I think about, the situations that I want to deal with in life, running back by committee is just not really one of them if I can avoid it in the 4th or 5th round. I just want my life to, it's life hack, And if there was a back that could really take off out of this offense, I would say that it is Myles Gaskin. But I don't think that he carries a 70 or 80 catch ceiling like some people think. And the reason why is multiple things. 1, we already talked about the committee. 2, they've got better weapons than they've ever had there. Now, their offensive line is a wreck. So I don't know how often they'll get to take deep shots to Will Fuller. I think Jalen Waddle's going to be in a great spot, playing underneath. So anyway, Myles Gaskin, is a guy that I'm definitely, steering clear of. I do think he's a very good receiving back. So, I mean, there's definitely a path. I just don't see the need. I'm going to make you, this is probably going to make you sad, Sig, but a player that I'm avoiding in round 4 is Julio Jones.
No.
It's Julio Jones.
I thought you were going to name the guy who's taking Julio Jones' spot. I thought that'll be a different topic.
No. So it's Julio Jones. And when I look at it, I still think, to your point, he could come through in the season. And now you've seen him get pushed so far. I saw him slide into the 6th round of a draft this last weekend. And it was a couple picks for me. And I was like, if he's here now, I'll take Julio Jones. I just wasn't taking him. He started off in the 4th earlier in the offseason. Injury news happened. That's really what depressed him down to the 5th round. And that's probably about where he needs to be, late 5th, early 6th. But I'm just fading him. And so again, like if you look at his adjusted target shares over the last several seasons, 27% down to 23%, down to 18%. So that's adjusting, right, for games missed. But it's not just that; it's some of the other metrics we talk about. Whenever you talk about, the yards per route, or sorry, the targets per route run, where Julio used to be like 31, 28, 30. So if you guys want to know what like top of the line, like elite sounds like for that statistic, that's it. But he started tailing off 29%, down to 26%, down to 22%. So, eventually Father Time catches up with all of us. Like I forget things that I used to never forget. Julio, yeah, I'm serious. Like sometimes I'm like sitting there, I'm like, what was I doing? Julio Jones, it's just at that point where it's a very physical game and he plays a lot. When I look at Julio, it's interesting, Sig. Like a lot of receivers that I think back to that I loved growing up, like Marvin Harrison and Isaac Bruce and a lot of these guys, like they really knew how to avoid the contact. Julio was always more of the player that once the ball was in his hand, he really turned into a running back. He didn't shy away, from much. And where he was often targeted on the field, although he could get targets anywhere. Like a lot of targets, and I think this is the thing with Michael Thomas too. There's different targets take different tolls on your body. So when you've got to go leaping for a ball and falling down all the time, remember Calvin Johnson when Stafford would just
that's who I was thinking of.
Over
he
everyone.
Took shots like a battleship, like a broadside battleship. Yeah.
And Julio took those not only at the point of the catch, but after the catch. And so I think eventually those things just catch up with you. So Julio, is a player that I'm fading. I'm going to name a couple others, and then like you can tell me if there's certain ones you want to get into. But David Montgomery in round 3, I'm fading. Patrick Mahomes in round 2. Again, this is an ADP thing. This is not this is not a player thing. This is an ADP thing. So Pat Mahomes is the player in round 2. And round 1, I own 0 of Derrick Henry or Ezekiel Elliott in any redrafts. I do own them in some best ball to make sure that I have some exposure, but I've faded both players.
Yeah, I'll go back. And I think that those are players, Henry and Elliott and Jones, but Jones is by far the biggest of the 3, where a little part of you feels like, is this the year that things drop off a little bit? Is this the year when we really see that they're in the early part of the decline, or in Julio's case, maybe the middle part of the decline phase? And on Julio, what's interesting about him is I think that you can really talk yourself into it either way, because the reality is, yes, this is the script. The franchise-defining player gets traded. That usually means they're on the decline. Who knows the player better than his organization? But the Falcons had to trade him because of cap issues, not because they've just decided that they need to rebuild and move on from him. So that could be a little bit confusing. But even if you're fading Julio, from his typical ADP until this year, he is available at a 3-round discount. So the hive mind is already saying, "Whoa, worried about Julio, 3-round discount." And arguably he's in a better situation than he was in Atlanta in terms of the coverage he's going to get, because the Tennessee offense is going to give defenses a choice where there's no right answer. You're either going to stack the box and then you're going to leave Julio and A.J. Brown in single coverage. Maybe you're going to put safety help over the top for A.J. Brown. Now you're going to take someone out of the box and Derrick Henry can run. The point is, there's just no way that you can adequately allocate resources to these 3 guys on any given play. And so hopefully they're just going to use the Arthur Smith playbook. So I can go either way, but I'm with you, Dwain, where in the moment of truth, if Julio was staring at me, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Montgomery, I think that's a byproduct also of, no, all these guys are getting hurt. Akers, Dobbins, etc. So Montgomery should have been a 4th-round pick. He was okay consideration in the 4th round, not in the 3rd round, as you said. Mahomes,
just
give me
real quick on him. Like the big thing for Montgomery is I think he needs the receiving work to pay off. So if you guys, pay much attention to PFF or not, I don't know. But one of the cool things that I was able to do with my running back tiers this year is really look at explosive yards over expected. So really, how explosive is a running back, really? Because we talk a lot about it, and it does matter. You want guys that can break the longer runs. They can beat the angles. They can, that one run, Sig, that turns into a 12-point play. A few of those a year goes a long way towards, your fantasy season. And a few of those a year go a long way towards giving you, a win, on any given week. And Montgomery was just terrible. and so was Zeke. So what this particular metric does is it actually accounts for number of players in the box, down and distance, and basically neutralizes all of that and saying, okay, in these equal situations, how do these backs rank versus one another? And David Montgomery is in the bottom quartile of the league. So is Ezekiel Elliott now. Zeke basically hit a cliff 3 years ago and gone straight down, all the way down. And so Montgomery, if you look at 2019, only a 1.6% of his carries, once normalized, went for 10 yards or more. And then 2.6% was his explosive run rate in 2020. Those are really, really bad numbers. So I have a back that I'm concerned with Damian Williams being there. And then you'll eventually get Cohen back. Like, I just don't know that he's going to get any of the receiving work, which I think he needs. And actually, when you look at him in the receiving game, he actually grades kind of underwhelmingly there as well, but the volume could be enough to help him. And so last year, despite those explosive plays at the end of the year, once you normalize for everything, David Montgomery still really struggles. He's a player that plays east-west way more than north-south, which has typically not been good to backs in the NFL. Now, I know there are exceptions. Barry Sanders, there are certain guys that can do that, but I don't think David Montgomery is one of those. And really, just to kind of put the cherry on top of Zeke, it's gone from 7.6% explosive runs over expected in 2018, dropped down to 4.1% in 2019 SIG, and then last year all the way down to 2.4%. Now, the positive side of Zeke, what you could say is, well, the entire offensive line was hurt, and that's correct. So with Zeke and Henry, for me, they're just more fades in the middle of the first round, especially in PPR. And the reason why is I don't think I have to own them to win my league. I don't think owning them wins the whole thing for me. In other words, I could take Tyreek Hill. I could take Devontae Adams. I could take another player that I think probably has the same floor, similar upside, with just a tad less risk. Now, you do have to be prepared for how you're going to build your roster if you take a receiver in the first round instead of a running back. So you got to think those things through. But overall, that's really where I landed with my strategy. Now, I've got zero exposure to those two players in my big redrafts, but I have plenty in my best ball, and that's how I'm trying to account for it. Because over there, I did enough, and they'll fall to pick 8 or 9, and once they get to that spot, it's like I'm comfortable with them.
Before I address what Dwain's saying, I do want to tell you folks, if you're not subscribing or you're not going to subscribe, you still can get part of the Football Guys Brain Trust by subscribing to the free daily newsletter with takes on the latest news from me, from Cecil Lammey, from Joe Bryant. Sometimes we'll give you some subscriber content for free, and otherwise make sure that you know everything that we know. Go to footballguys.com/join, join that free email list. You can opt out at any time. I think you'll find that you'll be happy that you opted in. Real quick, because I wanted to go back to the Chicago offense. You mentioned Montgomery. And I will say this just to take a little bit of the glass half full take on Montgomery, Dwain, okay? I would be interested in that PFF metric from week 11 forward last year, because that is when things really came together for the Bears run blocking. And their interior offensive line is excellent as a run blocking unit. Tackle, we'll see. The other thing about Montgomery, and this is just the whole Bears offense, because we're not week 1. By the way, if we're just narrowing it down to week 1, they get the Rams without Brandon Staley and all of his trickery, etc. But still, they get the Rams week 1, and it's Andy Dalton, and we'll see. But going forward, and you mentioned Cole Kmet, I think Andy Dalton and Cole Kmet could make beautiful music together. Remember Tyler Eifert? Remember the red zone love that Dalton would give Eifert? So I think Cole Kmet is certainly someone who could break out with Andy Dalton. Now with Justin Fields, we're going to see the offense change, and that is more Darnell Mooney's music because of the eerie deep accuracy from Fields, and that you have to think Nagy's going to use the run game to set up the deep shot. And that is what is going to work for this team. Now, what is Fields' presence going to do for David Montgomery? I think it's just an easy starting consideration that a running quarterback that forces the defense to play 11 on 11 is good for running backs. It's just going to create more situations that running backs take advantage of. So, I was never a big David Montgomery guy. You're right. Early in his career, he was an East-West guy. He absolutely lacks burst. He lacks acceleration. So I'm not stumping for David Montgomery. But at the same time, Justin Fields could change the complexion of this offense and make almost everybody an overachiever, at least in efficiency terms. Now, maybe Allen Robinson's volume is going to take a hit. It's going to be really interesting to watch. There's so many teams that we can look at this year, Dwain, and see a very wide range of outcomes. And then obviously we see a very wide range of outcomes for those players. And Zeke, just to put a cherry on that, I said, I think months ago, Dwain, that watching Zeke last year, you just got to feel like, have we seen the best of Zeke already? He started early, heavy workload. Dwayne Pollard had more juice. Now Zeke showed up this year, ripped and shape and things. Hopefully the offensive line can stay healthy. We're not going to see Zach Martin. That's another thing. Tampa Bay, we had a question in the chat room about benching Zeke. Who you have behind him, Myles Gaskin. No, don't go that far. But it may be the kind of game. Remember Saquon Barkley's week 1 last year, like 6 catches for 60 yards. And I don't even know if he had a rushing yard until like his 10th carry. It may be rough against Tampa week 1. We'll see. I got to ask you, Dwayne, because everybody knows how I feel about this player, but you are level-headed, as everyone can tell, not like me. Kyle Pitts, because let me give you my week 1 take on Kyle Pitts, okay? Very interesting that Arthur Smith has barely played the first team offense. You would think first year coach, new offense install, you'd want to use the preseason. No. We saw 1 Kyle Pitts target. Everything we heard from practices, everything in the offense is focused on Kyle Pitts. The coaches are focused on Kyle Pitts, especially in the red zone. So I'm just saying week 1, okay, your DFS plays, maybe if you're missing out and you want to try to get a trade in for Kyle Pitts, do it now, because the big surprise factor is never going to be stronger than it is in week 1. So whatever, because we know, what have we heard about Kyle Pitts in camp, Dwayne? They're moving him around a lot. They're not lining up in the same spot twice in a row. So the Eagles are going to have to be reacting in real time to what Arthur Smith has up his sleeve with Kyle Pitts. And as the season goes on, teams will be able to understand and prepare for Kyle Pitts, but the Eagles don't have anything to go on. And the Eagles safeties and linebackers don't exactly strike me as a group that you want to trust to improvise, especially against a player like Kyle Pitts. If you haven't seen the 1 preseason snap target he got, then go check it out just so you can see that he's a different kind of cat. He's a different kind of cat. Kyle Pitts, are you going to tell me to calm down, or are you going to say, no, I'm excited too?
No, I'm excited too. I mean, with Pitts, it's interesting because everyone is so excited, Sig. I mean, it's hard. He's a player that started off pretty high in ADP, and it's only kept moving higher. Nothing has stopped the train. So my exposure to Kyle Pitts is about 20%. I would like it to be a little more. He's a guy I would like to be at 25% on, especially in like my Footballguys Players Championship leagues. But people don't mess around with him there. Like they take him, they'll come around the turn. They'll start off with Christian McCaffrey, come back, take Justin Jefferson, and people just about Kyle Pitts, boom. Like they just want this explosive. And think about that. That's exciting to think about, isn't it? I mean, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, and Kyle Pitts. Like, how more excited could you be about sitting down for a Sunday of football with those 3 players? Yeah, so I totally get it. I think the biggest thing for Pitts, with Hayden Hurst on the team, like, how's it going to work? I mean, are they going to use him at receiver enough? My only concern, and again, you can overcome these things, i.e., we just talked about Claypool and Terrace Marshall before. Like, I think targets per route run is going to be high for Kyle Pitts. I think there's going to be a lot of design. I think there's going to be plenty of mismatch situations. I think he's going to be, in really good shape. But what you have to ask is like, okay, well, how often is he going to get to be on the field? So if he could get to that 71, 75% range of routes per passing play, 28 players have reached that mark, Sig, since 2011, tight ends. Top 12 finishes, we've seen 16. That's not really what you're shooting for with Kyle Pitts, though, right? If you're drafting Kyle Pitts where you're drafting him, you're not shooting for a top 12 finish. Let's be honest. You want at least top 6. So if you can get to that number, you would think this wouldn't be this high, but 43% of the players of the top 6 finishes, were in that 71 to 75% range. And then top 3 finishes, you still got 4, so 14%. Now, if you can get to the next bucket, Sig, 76 to 80%, it doesn't do much. But once you get to the 80, which is elite, that's where Travis Kelce sits. That's where Gronkowski has set in the past. That's where Aaron Hernandez has set in the past. That's where, basically Zach Ertz. Last year, Logan Thomas wasn't exactly like the best, tight end ever, but he was in a route on 90% of the plays. When you're out there 90% of the time, Like, you're probably going to be a top 6 tight end. Like, it's just going to happen. But when you can add something like Kyle Pitts's, athleticism and the mismatch, factor that he brings, like, wow, like he could completely blow the roof off. That's whenever you see your top 3 finish percentage jump to 36%, and top 12 is like a lock. You're at 87%. But I think even at that 71 to 75% range, which is about where I think he's going to be this year, Sig, I think there's enough upside because he's going to be such a playmaker that I think it's still there. And for me personally, I still have Hawkinson graded ahead of him, but I've taken Pitts ahead of Hawkinson multiple times just because I want to have Kyle Pitts. Like, I want him on some of my teams. And a buddy of mine that I do a lot of these drafts with, this past weekend, we drafted like 8 teams. Or it was like, we do this every Labor Day weekend. Like, we draft a ton of teams together. And every time, Sig, we were down at the end, like between, picks 8 and 12, like it'd be the third round. This is tight end premium, by the way. So 1.5 for tight end receptions. Like, he would go right in front of us. And we're like, damn it. So, I mean, we were pulling the trigger on Hawkinson still because we can talk about Hawkinson later if you want. So I still love him. But no, I'm not here to calm you on Kyle Pitts. I do believe that we're taking him at a bit of his, I wouldn't say his complete ceiling, and he's definitely got a floor from here. But I just feel like there's enough there, Sig. And when here's the way I look at it. Like, zoom out for a minute. Let's just forget players and percentages and all these things. Like, they're all just now in the background, and you're just thinking about your draft strategy. And let's throw tight end premium out the window. And let's say you're in a normal draft, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Like, that's the format a lot of folks plan. Call it a half PPR. Once you get to the range where you would be willing to take T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, even I would say DJ Moore, a lot of these ascending talents that are still young that have done some Jerry Jeudy, all those players. Like, once you get to that range and you're willing to pull the trigger on those, which brings up another question, right? Are you willing to pull the trigger on those versus some of the more proven talents that probably aren't going to necessarily bust out further, but they're going to be there, right? Your Mike Evans, your Tyler Lockett's, your I don't want to say Chris Godwin because he still, I think, is at an age where there's still plenty of, there's still some potential upside there. And I like all those players, but it's more about you as the drafter. What my thought process is, wherever you get to the spot and you're comfortable with some of those other names I said, I say, why not Kyle Pitts? I think he belongs in that group of players because he could be trajectory changing and he could break out immediately. And if he does, you're going to be so happy. Just like any of those other players, they carry a higher bust rate versus Tyler Lockett. You know what Tyler Lockett's going to be. He's going to be good. But if you think T. Higgins could potentially truly blow up this year, well, Kyle Pitts really deserves to be in the same conversation. So that's the way I try to give people advice on it. A lot of it comes down to you. What are you comfortable with? There's a lot of different ways to win a fantasy league. And I try to mix it up. I approach some drafts one way, some drafts another based on the value that's falling and what's happening in the draft. But I love to be aggressive. And so if you're an aggressive drafter, Kyle Pitts is like, you should be all over it.
Yes. All those things. Yes, yes, yes. I think it was just because he was announced as a tight end. Dwayne, if they had just said Kyle Pitts pass catcher, there really wouldn't be a debate and everyone would understand. Oh yeah, they took him number 4 overall to throw him the ball and he's going to be good. He just needs to stay healthy. That's really it. Before we get to one last football topic and then we go off the rails here, I want to remind everybody, if you are cramming or hey, even if you didn't subscribe to Football Guys, but you want to get our help in season, we have so many things to help you. DFS, IDP leagues, dynasty leagues, and of course your classic redraft leagues. Go to join.footballguys.com/couch. Get your subscription, money back guarantee. You want to know how to show your support for this show. You love this show. You love what we do for you for free. Subscribe. You won't be sorry. It's more than you can handle. I'll tell you what's going to be more than anyone can handle, Dwayne, because I know you and I are eye to eye on this. And then we'll have a few minutes to go off the rails. Because week 1 surprises. I think that the Indianapolis Colts are going to be very surprised at what they see when you have that Sean McVay style offense with Russell Wilson at the helm. What say you?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I was just doing a podcast with Matt Waldman, I think 2 or 3 weekends ago, and we were just running through a bunch of the teams. And, Matt and I were doing like we normally do, going along. And he's like, well, let's do one more. And like, before he could even ask me, like, my immediate answer was Seahawks. And like, multiple people hit us on Twitter. They're like, yeah, classic. Dwayne wouldn't even let Matt finish the question. And he's saying Seahawks. So, man, I'm so excited about this, Sig. So here's the highest level of why. I think Shane Waldron coming over from the Rams brings the perfect balance for what Russell Wilson needs, but also for what Pete Carroll wants. Pete Carroll had a philosophical difference with Schottenheimer on a couple things. If you go read the quotes, they're very telling. Like Lockett talks about it. DK Metcalf talks about it. They talk about the offense was excited about let Russ cook whenever they ran into a brick wall in the middle of the year because they couldn't figure out how to beat the too high look when teams basically said, look, we're just not going to let Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf score long touchdowns. You're going to have to just march the field and also just honestly taking away one of the things Russ is best at. Like, who can drop a ball like that looks like a punt, like that's a rainbow in a bucket from like 2 miles away, like Russ Wilson? No other person on the planet. Like, not Patrick Mahomes can't throw that pass. Like Russ, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what's a good basketball
Justin
player?
Fields. I'm telling you, just go back and watch some of those Justin Fields deep balls. It's not
Fields
consistent.
has that?
He has that. You know who else had it? Robert Griffin III. Robert Griffin III had deep accuracy.
He did. But it's just the beauty of like how a cornerback can be, people can't see, like I'm pointing like they can, but like it can be the best coverage ever. And it literally just drops in perfectly. It's just like manna from heaven. It's just, oh, there's the ball right there. Like, and anyway, so I'm excited about this offense. I do think it's the perfect marriage because, one, there's much more of a levels concept of how they're going to attack the field. They're going to use more of the play action. They're going to use more running game. You're going to see Russ on more boots. I think they're going to do all sorts of things to get teams out of the too high look. One of them will be what Pete Carroll wants, which is running the ball more. But the beauty is, originally, you know, this is one of those teams, Sig, and I love it when this happens, like back in June and July when I was doing a lot of my baseline research about getting ready for the season that I draw from, like, as I do these things, and I just keep like building it. Like, I expect it to be down on Metcalf and Lockett because of Pete Carroll's comments about wanting to go back to Smash Mouth. And then when I saw who he hired, I was like, you know, like this could be perfect because technically speaking, the percentages are going to be more running than there was last year. There's going to be more run plays percentage-wise than last year. And it's going to look more balanced whenever you get to the first quarter, you get to the end of 3 drives, whatever it is, when the quality control person's like letting you know, like, here's where we are. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. Here's where we project to be based on like win probability, all that kind of stuff like that those people are doing. But I think what's going to be nice is because of the tempo that you're going to see Waldron bring, it's not going to hold down Russ and the rest of the team. They're going to see the same. They're still going to get to throw the ball just as much because they're going to run somewhere between 3 and 5 additional plays per game, which comes out to Sig, like, well, especially in a 17-game season, they could run as many as 2 extra games worth of passing plays this season that you're going to get out of Russ and all of his receivers. So it's going to be more than enough. You're not going to be at 61% pass, you know, like you may have been. You may be more like 57%, you know, 56%. But because of the number of plays they're going to run, it's going to be better. And I expect the offense to be way more efficient. And I do think the running game will be part of that because everything will be sewn together, just like what you see with McVay, like what you see with Kyle Shanahan. As much as running backs may not matter and there's all these different analytics, when I look at a lot of the best offenses in the league, they tie all that stuff together seamlessly. So a defense just never knows what's coming. There's complete element of surprise. So if you look at McVay and you look at his history, this is the other thing. If you read the training camp quotes, and this is where like certain things, like, you know, Sig, I don't know about you, like you'll read certain quotes from players. You're like, okay, that's kind of fluff, but there's certain things you're listening for. Jared Cook gave a ton of great stuff about the Chargers' new offense. And so especially when you hear the veterans talking, man, there's going to be a lot more motion. There's just going to be way less, you know, what I would call like static plays.
Yeah.
So if you look at last year, you know, 68 plays was where Waldron was at per game with McVay. 63 was shoddy. The year before was 66 Waldron, 63 was shoddy. But then if you look at, you know, what happened as far as, you know, the the motion and like all those other little things. So here's McVay. Like this is crazy. So you look at it, and Matt and I talked about this too. So play action, number one, 33%. So that's 5th in the league. Screenplays, 13%, 4th in the league. Shifter motion, 57%. That's 7th in the league. That's 7% over the NFL average. Trick look, just meaning you're giving some sort of oddity that the defense is like, whoa, what's going on? Who's got this? What are we accounting for? Who's got what assignment? 24.6% of the plays under McVay last year. That was 1st in the league. That's 16% above the NFL average. And in my opinion, this is what offensive coordinators should all be doing. Your job is to give your quarterback the biggest advantage at the time the ball is snapped. They then take over. Yes, they read the defense and do all those things beforehand and make adjustments as well. But my point being is you as the schemer, you should be bringing the element of surprise to your quarterback. That millisecond pause that the defender has to have creates that additional window for your receiver. And that's what you're going to see with this offense. I expect to see Russ like pick it up immediately. I think they're going to be hyper efficient, and I'm ecstatic about it. Sorry, that was a long answer, but there was a lot to cover.
It is, and I like how you can say ecstatic, but it's still in your very measured delivery and voice. But it is going to be like, what's Russell Wilson? He's been rowing upstream his whole career. What is it going to be like when his offensive coordinator play design, play calls, play sequencing, just concepts actually help him? Okay, we only got a few minutes for Off the Rails, as we saw Dwain in ecstasy. So I'm going to do kind of a lightning round thing. Okay, Dwain?
Yeah,
all right. Okay. Favorite movie when you were in middle school?
Favorite middle school movie? Oh, man. So high school would have been Tombstone. So if you guys follow me, Tombstone was it in high school. But I think in middle school, the one that I always went back to was Stand By Me.
Oh, yeah. Wow. There's a
one.
lot there. That's a good one. That captures so much of
I just got chill bumps saying the word.
Yeah, me too.
What's funny is I went back to watch that with my kids, and I was like, whoa, I don't know if you can watch. I don't remember all these bad words. I was like, my parents let me watch this? They did.
Right. There's a lot of themes in there about how your childhood, it's Freudian, right? Like your relationship with your parents affects you for your whole life. Okay. Favorite album, or I guess back then, see, I don't know if you're a little bit younger than me. I don't know if it would have been a CD, probably wasn't a cassette when you were in middle school.
Oh yeah, I had cassettes. So Sig, when I got to college, cassettes, you put the cassette in that ran to your CD player. So you have the CD player in the car. Right. So in my in my high school, formative years, I really got into music, and I was kind of lucky. There was a lot of good bands around here. Well, what I would call, comparatively speaking to what comes out of this area, you had a band called, Deep Blue something. We had a song called Breakfast at Tiffany's. Then you had Tripping Daisy came, from Dallas. And then you had the Old 97s, which were more like,
I knew you were going to say Old 97s. I knew it.
Love the Old 97s. My wife and I, one of our first dates was going to an Old 97s concert. So there's a picture back over here somewhere. I would get it, but it's over here of us. It's the one in the middle, and you see one of my buddies, and he's standing right behind us. That's at an Old 97s concert. And then the Toadies, man. I loved the Toadies. That was my first
Possum Kingdom, ever. Right? Yeah.
That was oh my gosh, yeah. And it was funny, as I can still go back and listen to Tripping Daisy, the Toadies, and Old 97s and the Toadies are my two favorite. But yeah, I listen to those things all the time. Literally just wore those CDs out.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's good because you're from that earth. You rose out of that same soil that they rose out of. So of course there would be an affinity there, as there's always an affinity for all the work Dwain McFarland does. Dwain, D-W-A-I-N, if you don't know, McFarland. Make sure to say the D at the end there. PFF now, but you've enjoyed his work everywhere you found him. Part of the Matt Waldman family tree. So the apple don't fall far from the tree, but it is an apple that will keep the fantasy doctor away whenever you follow him. And I want to just say real quickly to everybody out there who's expressed support, thank you. And maybe there'll be a day that I'll do a couch episode and just talk about this whole experience, because it will show up in my tree rings for sure. And I'm still absorbing it, and probably will still be absorbing it for a while. And we actually, I think we're very fortunate compared to a lot of people. Look up the United Homa Nation. If people want to know how to help out. Southeast Louisiana's hurting, folks. Hurting right now. And they need your help. And we will give you help, as always, at Football Guys, all the fantasy football universe out there. We just love spending time together. We love the roller coaster that is the season, that is about to begin. Nobody we'd rather spend that time with than you folks, because you're so very classy.